Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for nearly 2 decades, and he thought he had developed the emotional capacity to handle virtually any situation that arose on stage. He had witnessed confessions that shocked audiences, heard testimonies of sacrifice that moved millions to tears, and listened to stories that had challenged everything he thought he knew about family, identity, and the weight of secrets carried for lifetimes. But on that sweltering July afternoon in 2026, a 68-year-old woman named Barbara Jenkins would confess something so devastating, so profoundly heartbreaking in its revelation of a choice made 47 years ago that had shaped every moment of her life since, that Steve would stop everything, literally raising both hands and calling for a complete halt to production, because what was being revealed was too raw, too significant, and too life-altering to be handled within the constraints of a game show format. 2 families stood ready to compete, the Patterson family from North Carolina and the Jenkins family from Tennessee. The Jenkins family drew immediate attention because at their center stood Barbara Jenkins, a dignified 68-year-old woman with carefully styled gray hair, tired brown eyes that held decades of sorrow, and a posture that suggested someone who had been carrying an unbearable weight for so long that it had become part of her physical structure. She wore a simple cream blouse and navy slacks, and around her neck was a delicate gold locket that she touched repeatedly, as if drawing strength from it. Her family surrounded her with obvious love but also visible confusion. Her husband Gerald, who was 70, her daughter Michelle, who was 46, her son Robert, who was 43, and several grandchildren who seemed puzzled by their grandmother's obvious distress. During the pre-interview, Barbara had been quiet and composed, answering questions in brief, careful sentences, but the producers had noticed she seemed to be struggling with something, occasionally reaching for the locket at her throat and taking deep breaths as if steadying herself. When asked why she wanted to be on the show, she had said something that immediately raised concerns. "I'm 68 years old, and I'm carrying a secret that I've kept for 47 years. A secret that affects my daughter Michelle, though she doesn't know it. A secret about her birth, about choices I made, and about someone who should be in her life but isn't. I need to tell her before I die, and I'm doing it here, publicly, because if I try to tell her privately, I'll lose my courage the way I have 100 times before." Barbara's daughter Michelle, when asked if she knew what her mother might reveal, had spoken with obvious confusion and concern, saying, "My mother has been acting strangely for the past few weeks, saying she needs to tell me something important, something about my childhood. I have no idea what she's talking about. I had a normal childhood, normal parents, a normal life. I can't imagine what secret she could be carrying that would be so significant. But she's been insistent that she needs to tell me something on the show, in front of witnesses, and my dad has been supporting her in this even though he seems sad about it. I'm honestly frightened about what I'm going to hear." The Jenkins family won their game with quiet efficiency, Barbara contributing one answer in a barely audible voice. As they lined up for fast money, it was immediately clear that Barbara had no intention of playing the game. She positioned herself at the podium before anyone else could move, and when Steve approached her with his characteristic warmth to ask who would be playing, she cut him off gently but firmly and said, "Mr. Harvey, I can't play this game. I came here for one reason only, to tell my daughter Michelle the truth about something that happened 47 years ago, in 1979, when she was born. Something I've kept from her because I was ashamed and afraid, but that she deserves to know before I die." Steve's expression shifted immediately to one of serious concern, and he said carefully, "Mom, are you sure you want to do this here? Some conversations might be better in private." But Barbara shook her head and said, "If I try to have this conversation in private, I'll back out the way I have for 47 years. I need witnesses. I need the pressure of being public to force me to finally tell the truth. Please, Mr. Harvey, let me do this." Steve looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly and said, "All right, Mrs. Jenkins, tell us what you need to tell us." The studio fell into a profound, expectant silence. Barbara turned to face her daughter Michelle, and tears were already streaming down her face as she said, "Michelle, I need to tell you about the day you were born. October 15, 1979. You know the story I've always told you, that you were born in a hospital in Memphis, that the birth was normal, that your father and I were overjoyed to have you. All of that is true. But there's something else, something I've never told you, something that's haunted me every day for 47 years. Michelle's face showed immediate alarm, and she said, "Mom, what are you talking about? What didn't you tell me?" Barbara's hands were trembling as she reached for the locket at her throat, opened it, and removed a small, folded piece of paper that had clearly been inside for decades. She said, "Michelle, you were born a twin. You had a sister, and I gave her away." The collective gasp from the audience was immediate and deafening, and Steve's face showed absolute shock. Michelle's mouth fell open, and she said in a voice filled with confusion and growing horror, "What? What are you saying? I had a twin sister. Where is she?" Barbara was sobbing now, but she forced herself to continue. "When you were born, you came first. You were healthy, strong, crying loudly. 2 minutes later, your sister was born. She was smaller, weaker, and the doctors immediately saw that something was wrong. They told us she had a severe heart defect, that she would need multiple surgeries, that she might not survive, and that even if she did, she would likely have significant health problems her entire life. Your father and I, we were young, only 21 years old. We had no money, no insurance, no way to pay for the kind of medical care she would need, and I panicked." Barbara's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, and she said, "There was a couple at the hospital. I never knew their names, who had been trying to have a baby for years and couldn't. They were wealthy, they had resources, and they were desperate for a child. The nurses, this was 1979, and things were different then. The nurses told me that this couple might be willing to adopt a baby with medical needs, that they had the resources to pay for the surgeries and care that your sister needed, and I made a decision that I've regretted every single day since." Barbara looked directly at her daughter and said through her sobs, "I gave your twin sister to that couple. I signed papers allowing them to adopt her. I let them take her away when she was 2 days old, and I never told you. I never told anyone except your father. For 47 years, I've lived with the knowledge that I separated you from your twin sister, that I gave her away because I was too poor and too scared to care for her, and that somewhere in the world you have a sister you've never met and don't even know exists." Michelle had collapsed into a chair, her face completely white, and she was shaking her head in disbelief. Steve stood frozen, his hands raised in a gesture of complete helplessness, and then he turned to the producers and said firmly, "Stop. Stop everything right now. We need to stop." He made a cutting motion across his throat, and the cameras immediately cut. For 45 minutes, the studio was in controlled chaos. Michelle was in shock, barely able to speak. Barbara was sobbing uncontrollably, her husband Gerald holding her and crying himself. The production staff were conferring urgently about how to handle this situation, whether to continue filming, what resources to provide. Steve sat with the family, no longer a host but simply a human being trying to provide comfort in the face of something overwhelming. When filming finally resumed, the entire atmosphere had changed. This was no longer Family Feud. It was something far more serious and profound. Steve sat on a stool facing Barbara and Michelle, who were sitting together, Michelle still in visible shock. Steve said very gently, "Mrs. Barbara, I need to understand what you're telling us. You're saying that when Michelle was born, she had a twin sister who had a serious heart defect, and you gave that baby up for adoption to a wealthy couple who could afford her medical care." Barbara nodded and said, "Yes, Mr. Harvey. That's exactly what happened. Michelle's twin sister. I named her Sarah, though I don't know if her adoptive parents kept that name, was born with a severe heart defect. The doctors said she needed surgery immediately and would need multiple more surgeries as she grew. We had no money, no insurance. I was terrified she would die because we couldn't afford to care for her. When the nurses told me about this couple who wanted to adopt and who had resources, I thought I was making the right choice, giving her to people who could save her life. But what I was actually doing was separating twins, robbing Michelle of her sister, and living with unbearable guilt for 47 years. Michelle finally found her voice and said, "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Why did you keep this from me my entire life?" Barbara looked at her daughter with infinite sadness and said, "Because I was ashamed, Michelle. Ashamed that I gave your sister away, ashamed that I chose to keep you but not her, ashamed that I separated you from your twin because I was too poor to care for both of you. And as the years went by, it became harder and harder to tell you. How do you tell a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 20-year-old that they have a twin sister you gave away at birth? So I kept silent, and the silence became its own prison," Steve said. "Mrs. Barbara, do you know what happened to Michelle's twin sister? Do you know if she's alive?" Barbara pulled out the folded piece of paper she had removed from her locket and said, "This is the only information I have. It's the name of the adoption agency that handled the placement in 1979. I've carried it in this locket for 47 years, taking it out and looking at it hundreds of times, wondering if I should try to find her, wondering if she's alive, wondering if she hates me for giving her away. But I've been too afraid to actually search. I didn't even know if it was legal for me to try to find her." Michelle reached out and took the paper from her mother's trembling hands. She looked at it, then looked at her mother and said, "Mom, I don't understand how you could keep this from me. I'm 46 years old, and I'm just now learning I have a twin sister somewhere in the world. I can't even process this, but I need to find her. I need to know if she's alive, if she's okay, if she survived all those surgeries. I need to meet my sister." Gerald, Barbara's husband and Michelle's father, spoke for the first time. He said, "Michelle, your mother has been tormented by this decision for 47 years. Every birthday you celebrated, every milestone, she was thinking about your sister and wondering what she was doing, whether she was alive, whether we'd made the right choice. We thought we were giving her to people who could save her life, but we've spent 47 years not knowing if she even survived, living with the guilt of separating you two." Steve looked at the family and said, "This is beyond anything we can handle on this show. What you need are professional resources, adoption search services, reunion specialists, possibly legal assistance. I'm going to personally make sure you're connected with the best people to help you try to find Michelle's twin sister. This is about reuniting a family that was separated 47 years ago, and that's more important than any game." The episode that eventually aired, months later, after extensive ethical review and with the family's consent, became one of the most emotionally powerful programs in television history. But more significantly, it sparked an actual search for Michelle's twin sister. The show worked with adoption search specialists and reunion experts, and using the information Barbara had kept in her locket for 47 years, they began the process of trying to locate the twin who had been adopted in 1979. 3 months after the initial taping, the search team found her. Her name was Sarah Chen. Her adoptive parents had kept the name Sarah that Barbara had given her, and she had been adopted by a Chinese-American couple named James and Linda Chen who had paid for all her medical care. Sarah had indeed survived. She had undergone 5 heart surgeries between infancy and age 12, but the surgeries had been successful, and at 46 years old, Sarah was alive, healthy, and living in California. She was married, had 2 children, and worked as a teacher. Sarah had always known she was adopted and had been told she had medical issues at birth that her biological parents couldn't afford to treat. She had wondered about her birth family, but had been told there was no information about them. When the reunion specialists contacted her and told her that her biological mother and her twin sister were looking for her, Sarah was shocked but eager to meet them. The reunion was arranged and filmed as a special follow-up episode. When Michelle and Sarah met for the first time in 47 years, it was immediately clear they were twins. They looked remarkably similar, had similar mannerisms, even similar voices. They embraced and cried, and Sarah's first words to Michelle were, "I always felt like something was missing, like there was supposed to be someone else. Now I understand. I was missing you." Barbara's reunion with Sarah was more complicated. Sarah was grateful that Barbara had chosen to place her with a family who could afford her medical care, acknowledging that decision had likely saved her life. But she was also angry that Barbara had separated her from Michelle, that she had grown up without knowing she had a twin sister, and that 47 years had been lost. Barbara apologized repeatedly, explaining that she had been a terrified 21-year-old with no resources who thought she was making the right choice, but had been haunted by it ever since. Over time, Sarah and Michelle built a relationship, slowly getting to know each other and trying to make up for the 47 years they had lost. Sarah's adoptive parents, James and Linda Chen, met Barbara and Gerald, and while the meeting was emotional and difficult, the Chens acknowledged that Barbara's decision to place Sarah with them had enabled them to give Sarah the medical care she needed, and had given them the daughter they desperately wanted. The situation was complicated. No one was entirely villain or entirely hero, but gradually, the two families found ways to connect and to honor the complexity of what had happened. Barbara lived for 3 more years after her confession, dying peacefully in 2029 at age 71. In her final years, she spent time with both daughters, finally able to have a relationship with Sarah and to see Michelle and Sarah build their twin bond. She said in interviews that confessing what she had done and facilitating the reunion was the most important thing she'd ever done, even though it came 47 years too late. At Barbara's funeral, both Michelle and Sarah spoke. Michelle said, "My mother kept a devastating secret for 47 years, that I had a twin sister who was given up for adoption. That secret robbed me of knowing my twin for the first 46 years of my life. But my mother's confession, as painful as it was, gave me Sarah. It gave me my sister back, and I'm grateful for that even as I grieve the decades we lost." Sarah said, "Barbara gave me away when I was 2 days old because she couldn't afford my medical care. That decision meant I grew up without knowing my biological family or my twin sister. But it also meant I survived. I got the surgeries I needed, I had parents who loved me and could care for me, and I lived. It's complicated. I'm grateful for the life I had with my adoptive parents, and I'm grateful that I got to know Barbara and Michelle in the final years of Barbara's life. I'm angry about the time we lost, but I'm grateful for the time we had. Both things are true." The story of Barbara's 47-year secret became a powerful testimony about impossible choices made in poverty, about the long-term costs of secrets kept from children about their origins, about the possibility of reunion and reconciliation even when it comes decades late, and about the complicated emotions that come with closed adoptions and separated siblings. It sparked important conversations about how we handle situations where parents make adoption decisions out of desperation, about whether separating twins is ever justified, and about the importance of maintaining sibling connections even in adoption situations. But perhaps most significantly, Barbara's confession became a reminder that the secrets we keep to protect ourselves or others often cause more pain than the truth would have caused, that it's never too late to tell the truth and try to make amends, and that while confession can't undo decades of separation and loss, it can create opportunities for connection and healing that wouldn't otherwise exist. As Barbara said in one of her final interviews, "I kept Sarah's existence a secret for 47 years because I was ashamed of giving her away, but that secret meant Michelle grew up not knowing she had a twin, and Sarah grew up not knowing she had a biological family looking for her. Confessing what I'd done couldn't give them back the 47 years they lost, but it gave them the rest of their lives to be sisters. That's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. And sometimes something is all we have to offer when we've spent decades making the wrong choices. I'm grateful I found the courage to confess before I died, and I'm grateful I got to see my daughters, both of them, know each other before I left this world. That's more than I deserved, and I'm thankful for it."